Welcome to the Marketing Chief Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Collins. If you'd like to watch this episode instead of just listen to it, head over to our website at marketingchiefpodcast.com or search for us on YouTube. This week, we continue with part 2 of our conversation with NBA veteran and sports marketer Mike Burch. Mike is the Chief Strategy Officer for Speedway Motorsports. As we rejoin the conversation, we are talking about the business of NASCAR. So you can talk about share, you can talk about ratings. How engaged are your fans? How much do they have passion for your brand? And that's something that I think has never gone away.
Yeah, you look at the research and NASCAR fans, why it's attractive to so many sponsors is because of the passion of the fan base. And they consistently rank that, are you more likely to buy a product if they're a NASCAR sponsor versus other sports? And NASCAR is continually ranked at the top of that metric relative to other sports. So I think because fans understand that, when you drink a Busch beer, you in some small way are supporting Kevin Harvick and the racing team. That there's no contractual, there's no CBA, it's not negotiated, there's no union. That driver is largely benefiting from the revenue that's being generated through sponsorship. So fans understand that. There was a driver, Boris said, who sponsored a drink company, and he would always tell fans, sell more cases, run more races, because he was not fully sponsored. But the more cases of the product that fans bought, that money then helped him get more sponsorship dollars. So I think race fans understand that, when they go to a Coca-Cola 600, that Coke sponsorship is helping that event happen. And when they're rooting for their driver, they understand that by them supporting that product, maybe it's only a fraction of a penny, but some amount of that money is going to help that race team. And there's that direct relationship between a fan behavior and the driver. There's no real kind of owner intermediating within that. There's no union intermediating. There's no league. Everybody's out there as an independent contractor. They're all coming together on this race weekend to create this competition and this event. So that engagement, that passion, I remember going down to Coke, and they monitor all their social media, and they see the highest engagement on Sunday afternoons with NASCAR fans, even higher than the NFL, because when you start to add up all the different pieces, so people who are followers of the event or of the track or of the team or of a Toyota or a Ford, individual driver, individual sponsors, you start to aggregate that universe together, and it's really powerful. It's hard to measure, because it's so disparate. It's not just, let's just go to NBA.com and that represents the whole piece. But there's the sport is so broad, the palette is so big, and that gives you a lot of flexibility and a lot of ways to be creative in meeting the objectives of whatever your target audience is, whether that's a corporate client, whether that's a fan, whether that's a manufacturer, whether whoever it is, a broadcast partner. We changed the schedule up a lot last year to create new events. We raced a dirt event for the first time in 40 years this spring at Bristol. We went to a new market in Austin at Circuit of the Americas, where it's funny, we rented a facility that we didn't own and took one of our race dates and ran it at that facility. And ironically enough, that's something our founder did 50 years ago. When he started the company, he would go and rent a horse track or rent a facility and promote the race without owning the facility. So we kind of went back to the future to try something new, to go to a new market in Austin, Texas, create a new buzz for our broadcast partners at Fox, and it was really successful.
That's really cool. So you produced the event at somebody else's venue. That's awesome.
And I think you'll see more of that as you try to reach new fans. 70% of the fans at that event were new to our database. So we definitely reach new people there, and I'm looking forward to finalizing the schedule for next year, and hopefully we'll get back to Austin again.
And what other series do you race other than NASCAR?
So we host an IndyCar event at our Speedway, Texas. We host 6 NHRA drag race events. We've got 4 drag strips around the country. Then all the support series in NASCAR. You've got the Xfinity series, which is kind of the AAA of NASCAR. We've got the truck series. And then actually we own and build and create what are called Legends cars, which is a 5/8 size car, a little smaller than normal car, kind of based on cars from the old bootlegger days. That actually most of the drivers who are racing at the top level started their careers driving in our Legends car. So it's kind of the Pop Warner version. If you wanted to get started, if your kids wanted to get started, it was actually designed to fit in the back of a Ford F-150 pickup truck, so you didn't have to buy a trailer or hauler. So you could just, and it's all spec parts. So the engine is sealed. It basically runs on a Honda motorcycle engine, but a lot of drivers start there and kind of work their way up the series. So the Dale Earnhardt Juniors of the world and the Chase Elliott's and the Bubba Wallaces all got their career kind of starting, and we build those about 5 miles from where I'm sitting right now. We sell all the parts and we sanction all the races. So we've kind of,
that's cool,
trying to get our fingers in as many pies as we can in the motorsports world.
Well, speaking of that, as things are evolving, as things are changing, you mentioned earlier how you're accommodating gambling in some form in your, what also about kind of the esports and the e-races and how that works together, and is that good for the sport? Does that help you guys, hurt you guys because you're a facility owner, or does it help because it's raising interest in the sport overall?
Yeah, no, we're big believers in it. And actually, when the pandemic hit, there's a couple different levels of esports and racing. There's the video game, the Xbox, PS4 version, but then there's a simulation called iRacing that a lot of the drivers use. And iRacing was so realistic that they actually, Fox broadcast iRacing races, and with the actual drivers, everything from Denny Hamlin sitting in a $40,000, simulator rig, to Timmy Hill, who won one of the races, literally driving, on a wheel you could buy at Best Buy, like bolted to his desk on his home PC. But it's the same inputs. So, there's a brake and a gas and a wheel. So the same things the drivers are doing, like Kevin Durant, pushing an X and moving a joystick is not the same thing as shooting a jump shot or playing defense. But when these drivers are using the iRacing simulator, they're actually using the same inputs. A lot of them will use it for training when they're going to a track that they're going to a road course, or we're going to one of these new circuits. They will spend hours driving in iRacing to kind of get a feel for the track. So 9 of the 10 top broadcasts on television from esports are iRacing NASCAR events. So the sport lends itself very well. And there's actually a driver, William Byron, who races for Hendrick Motorsports, drives the 24 car that Jeff Gordon made famous. He actually got his start in iRacing in like middle school. He got into it, drove on iRacing, said, I really like this. Mom and Dad, would you, I want to do this for real. And when we did our deal with iRacing, we made sure that our Legends cars was the first car that you raced in that series. So if you wanted to eventually race stock cars, you had to race in one of our Legends cars just to introduce people and build the Legends cars brand. So his parents actually went out and bought him a Legends car. And so he ran the Legends series here in Charlotte. They went to a late model car. Crazy. They went to the truck series. They went to the Xfinity series. And now he's racing for Hendrick Motorsports. And Chase Elliott, our most popular driver, there's a series on Peacock called Chase that kind of Dale Jr. kind of walks through his career. And he actually goes back to and shows his Bandolero car and talks about his Legends car and what he learned. So there's a legitimate series. Like, no matter how good I get at NBA 2K, I'm not going to play in the NBA. But you have an actual case where a kid went the video game route, got good at the video game, and then just step by step moved up the ladder to reaching the major leagues of his sport. So we're big believers in iRacing. We've been partners with them since early days. We were, and like when they did our Legends car, they didn't just take a picture of it and create one. They actually came down to our shop and they scanned every single part. And then they virtually took those virtual parts and built the virtual car. So the car is not just like this shell that you're manipulating, but it's as close to a real Legends car as you're going to get. They scan these tracks down to, I think it's about 2 millimeters. So they are detailed. They have their own physics model. They have their own atmosphere model. So if the humidity levels, you can set every single aspect to it because it all affects how they have their own tire model, that how the grip adheres, their own asphalt model. So I mean, it is literally as real as it gets. And the drivers don't want to play the video games. They really only want to get involved on iRacing because that's the closest thing. They can look really bad if a video game kid beats them on a video game, but I've raced against some of the drivers, randomly, just ran into Dale Jr. one night racing a Legends car at South Boston Speedway, and he was 3 seconds a lap faster than me on a 22nd lap. And so these guys are really good. So we're
Sure.
big believers in that. Really see that as being a great entry point. And how do we do more to create compelling gaming experiences, from the iPhone, the mobile gaming, to the video gaming, to the simulation, to actually get people. And that's how I learned the sport growing up. Was I played a lot of video games, and that's how I learned who drove what cars, who the sponsors were, and who the different team folks were. So it's a great tool. We've seen that with FIFA, we've seen that with Madden, we've seen that with 2K. That really introduces a lot of athletes or a lot of kids to sports. It gets them familiar with the athletes.
Well, I ran across one of those broadcasts during the pandemic, and I bet it took me 3, 4, 5 minutes. Is this real? Something's not quite right, but it was very realistic. I mean, it was so good.
It's photorealistic. I mean, you really have to look close to not, because it's all modeled. The sunlight, the shading, the camera angles. And I think that's one of the reasons that made it successful, is that it was very similar. People knew what they were looking at. You watch some of, the Overwatch League and some of these things. It's very disorienting if you're not super familiar with the game. So the fact that you had and then there's Mike Joy and Jeff Gordon doing the announcing. You had the authentic, network announcers.
Exactly.
In a photorealistic, simulation that's powered by the same inputs with the actual drivers using the actual tools that they use. So you add all together, and it's actually a pretty compelling opportunity.
Are there, without revealing any secrets, are there, from a revenue standpoint, from a licensing standpoint, are there licensing deals between the car owners and the owners of the tracks and the people, for all of that, iRacing type of thing? Are there?
It's incredibly complicated. It's not.
Well, I'm assuming, but there's money changing hands, right?
Yeah. And I would say it's. I mean, I like getting the royalty check every quarter for because we have a relationship with them. So as iRacing has gotten more popular, those checks have increased. But it's not, it's not really super material when the broadcasters are paying tens of millions of dollars a race to broadcast those rights. The rights we get from licensing our brands, or the rights the team get. But for me, it's much more about an exposure opportunity. Again, it was really important for us to have those Legends cars as part of that process, so people understood what those cars were and how they fit in. And it's important that our tracks be represented in these simulations or in these games, because the hope is that, hey, if you've driven a lot, or you've enjoyed participating at Charlotte Motor Speedway in the NASCAR heat game, at some point say, hey, I'm going to go check this out, and you'll be a little more familiar with it and a little understanding of the sport. Maybe you'll watch a little more. Maybe you'll pick a favorite driver, and that may be the thing that gets you into the sport.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's goes back to the passion and the engagement. I love the creativity of coming up with something like that. For our last few minutes, Mike, let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about you as a coach, as a mentor, as a mentee. You've had people in your life. Talk about this concept of your personal board of directors and kind of what that's all about.
Yeah. Again, I've been very fortunate to actually be able to interact with a lot of people who've had a huge influence on me. But when you think about, especially today, the access and the resource we have, not just to people, but in books and podcasts like this, thinking about who are the people, or where are the sources you can go to help yourself grow. What books can you go back to? I mean, there's just so many. I look at there's people like Ray Dalio, and his Principles book has been really influential on me. A writer like James Clear and his Atomic Habits book was a tremendous influence. Again, Ryan Holiday and his Stoicism. Obviously, the Bible and the commentaries and the foundational work there. But you think about it, and so you start to think about that. If my life is a company and I'm the CEO of my company, who are the people who are directing my life? And for me, Jesus and the Bible are probably my chairman. But then people like your parents, peers, or I have a group of people that I meet with, pretty regularly. where we can talk about, the struggles that we're having or the challenges that we're having as leaders. But there's so many tools out there that you can also use to bring in and make those folks, and they may change, as my kids have gotten older, into their 20s now. I've maybe had a few parenting folks who maybe dropped off the board of directors, so I'm not as engaged with them as, how do I raise an infant? How do I raise a toddler, the middle school years, the high schoolers? Some different friends now, like how do you transition your kids from college into the working world? But thinking about that, what are you putting into your mind? How are you spending your time? Are you mindlessly scrolling through your feed? Are you watching, the latest, whatever show, or are you taking that time to read books, to listen to podcasts, watching documentaries, going out, meeting with people, talking to people via Zoom or via teleconference, to help yourself grow and get better.
Right.
And we have to constantly learn. Society is constantly evolving, constantly changing. And as leaders, if we're not evolving, what value can we bring back to the table? And you can't get stuck in your ways, because there was a quote I use pretty often, that if you don't like change, you're going to hate irrelevance. So
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. So keeping up to date with what's going on in the world, what's going on in technology, what's going on with people who are stakeholders. And I think that's another important thing to realize with the board of directors too, is there's a lot of noise out there, and there's a lot of people who are willing to comment, be critical, and hold an opinion, who don't have any skin in the game. Mm-hmm. So I really try to tune those folks out. The people who don't have a vested interest in me as a person, I'm not super interested in what their opinion is. People who aren't paying customers, people who aren't viewers, people who aren't sponsors, people who haven't put either time or emotion or money on the table and are in the game. Right. Those are the people I want to listen to. My family, my close friends. There's just a whole bunch of noise, whole bunch of casual people. We've got that core group. I think we have about 5,000 people that we kind of know their faces, and out of that, there's about 20 people in our lives that are really important. So don't let those 5,000 take you away from making sure you make a difference to those 20 people. And it's not who comes to your funeral, it's who cries at your funeral. And people will come out of obligation, out of respect, but have you made an emotional connection? Have you made a difference in somebody's life that they say, I'm sad that this person is no longer part of my life? And as you get a little older, you realize that's really what the game is about, giving to other people, sharing your experiences, helping other people achieve their goals, achieve their vision of success, and helping share your perspective, share what's worked for you. I think that's really important. Just always frame things as, this is what worked for me. It may or may not work for you, but this is what has made me successful. And can you take pieces and parts from other successful people's lives, people who walk the path ahead of you, people that you want to be like. And I have a little band here that I keep on my wrist, says, be a godly steward. And that's really what I try to focus on every day, that none of this is mine. I have been entrusted with this. I have been entrusted with a spouse, entrusted with kids, entrusted with a job, entrusted with responsibility, literally entrusted with other people's trust to make decisions. And if I can go to sleep at night knowing that I did my best to use those things to the best of my ability, then whatever's happened, I sleep pretty good.
Yeah. Well, man, I appreciate you sharing that. I've been off a few weeks from the podcast, and one of those reasons was my mom passed away, and we had people at the funeral who got up and told stories about my mother that I didn't know. I had a friend text me and say, when I was in college, your mom gave me this advice, and she quoted the advice that my mom had given her 40 years ago, right? And so that's a life where, she invested into other people. And so I love what you're saying. You're being a steward of your talents and of your time and of your resources, and making sure you're putting it in the right place. Have you read the book, Ernie Johnson, TNT?
Yes.
Inside the NBA. Have you read his book, Unscripted?
I have not. I saw the talk he gave at the University of Alabama. And,
yes.
Yeah, and have it on my list to read. But big fan of Ernie's.
I'm a big fan of Ernie too, and I will tell you, you will get that book and you'll read it in about a night and a half. because it reads easy. And just, if you want to talk about a guy who's been through challenges and had career successes and had devastating things happen to him and come through with, a strong faith and a strong purpose, that's a book you want to grab a hold of. Anybody, Mike, in your circle, along your travels, athletes, celebrities, anybody that you would say, Rob, you'd be surprised, but this guy's this gal's a really great person, and you would never know it because they operate under the radar, but they're just such a influential.
Boy, again, he's not too under the radar, but one I really point to that I didn't spend a ton of time with, but spent a reasonable time, is Charles Barkley.
Okay.
And
nice.
Charles is somebody who, one of the most open-minded people I've ever met.
Uh-huh.
And the Charles Barkley that you see on TV is the Charles Barkley that you get in real life. And there are so many people.
Brother.
Yeah. And when you really sit down and listen to him, you may not agree with everything that he says, but he doesn't. A lot of ways he doesn't hold traditional views, and so mm-hmm. much of what he says is right on point, especially where we are today as a society. And as a black man, I listen to his perspective because I may be a man, but I'm never going to be able to understand what he went through. And he may mm-hmm. point to the fact, look at how wealthy I am, but he wasn't always Charles Barkley, the icon. So he's somebody that, having spent time with him when he was on the Rockets and worked
sure.
with him on different things, saw that he is the same guy when the camera is on him as he is when the camera is off him. And there's so many people that, the camera goes off and they just change. They change demeanors. But
yes.
But again, people like a Dean Smith, somebody just had a huge influence on me. People like Pat Williams, people like Rudy Tomjanovich. The person I work for here, Marcus Smith, my boss, and also consider a friend. Great Christian values. It's been a joy to work with him and to be able to earn his trust and to be able to have an influence on the company, mm-hmm. to try to make this a place that people enjoy coming to work, that people feel like they're part of something bigger, that people treat each other with respect and as teammates, and work kind of get those four principles again that uniting people together, because we all want to be part of something bigger.
Right.
We don't just want to be. We weren't designed. I mean, COVID has shown us we were not designed to be isolated. We were designed to be together and work together. And more, it's not about how much money do you make. It's not about what is your job. It's about, am I doing something alongside other people to bring something to the world that makes the world a better place? And for us, it's, hey, if we can take somebody's mind off whatever else is on their mind to come and have a good time at a race or at an event, again, create a remarkable event in their minds, then we feel like we've done our job.
Absolutely. Mike, man, I cannot thank you enough for spending an hour with me today. Really appreciate your words of wisdom, your perspective. Just thanks for being on the Marketing Chief podcast. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Great to connect again. And we'll definitely continue to follow and catch up on the past episodes.
Yeah, sounds good. If you like what you hear on the Marketing Chief podcast, be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast app or YouTube, and give us a rating on Apple Podcasts. We'll see you next time on the Marketing Chief podcast.